Welcome to GoJo and Golic. Mike Golic Jr., Mike Golic Sr. is here. Jesse Cofield and I both holding it down here in the DraftKings studios in Boston. And we are festive as all hell in here right now,
Look
Jesse.
at this Christmas setup. Have you ever seen so much Christmas in one place? We are feeling very festive, very holiday-oriented here, and we're excited about it.
We are. We have Dad nestled over here, hung by the stockings with care, in hopes that a guy that actually looks like St. Nicholas will show up on this giant screen next to our Christmas tree in studio. We have a great show for you guys today, in addition to the holiday decor that will be gracing us for the rest of the week here. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out here live Monday through Friday on DraftKingsNetwork.com, the DraftKings YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, and more. We are brought to you by Wrangler, made for the ride of life. You can save 15% or more on your favorite first Wrangler.com order with promo code GOJO15. It will also be your favorite. Fun guests coming up today. Andrew Whitworth, former NFL offensive tackle, current member of the TNF on Prime crew, going to stop by and help us look ahead to this next weekend in sports. But we also got our good buddy, Charlotte Wilder, the co-host of Oddball with Amin El Hassan, back for another Wilder Wednesday. Char, how we doing, bud?
Doing amazing. I'm so happy to join you in such a festive spirit. And I don't know that we can ever talk enough about the throne that you're sitting in, Mike.
Yes.
That's a it's a vibe. I'm into it. I wish I had a throne.
It's big. It's throne-like. Is it comfortable? That's the question.
Honestly, it is pretty comfortable, and a weird thing happens around here. So coming and becoming a part of DraftKings, you walk into the studio and you're immediately shown this throne in the lobby of the offices here, and it commands all this power. And then you sit down and you don't realize when you sit down in a throne surrounded by holiday stuff, milk and cookies just appear, especially when you're a thick bearded guy.
Yeah.
So I think there's just something about the season, it begets that. So I got milk and cookies over here for the entire show here. Life's pretty great.
Yeah, you can just eat those as it's early in the morning, but you can just dip those in the milk.
I mean, this is like it's 5 o'clock somewhere, but Santa's version where you can always have milk and cookie when you're the Claus. So that's kind of the situation that we're in right now, guys. And I'm feeling pretty good about it, Dad. I can see the jealousy on your face right now.
I'm just interested in what Jesse said. You can eat the cookies. It's early in the morning. Jesse, there is no minute of the day where a cookie cannot be ingested.
I mean, you're right. You're absolutely right. I mean, there's a cereal made of tiny cookies.
That is true.
Boom.
And we need to never forget that Cookie Crisp out here doing its thing.
That's the close-up that I needed. Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the show here, guys. So maybe if you are all lucky, I will share my milk and cookies as we go along with the show. But before we get to any of the eating, we've got to get to someone who ate on the court last night. There's a segue. Ja Morant made his return last night and birthed the most insane statistic I have ever seen popped up on an NBA broadcast in my life, as Ja Morant helps hit a game-winning shot at the buzzer to lift the Grizzlies over the New Orleans Pelicans. A battle, by the way, that featured Ja Morant and Zion Williamson, the two players that were the features at the top of their draft class that were hotly debated for so long, that have both enjoyed very tumultuous careers thus far for very different reasons. He gets that win. And Charlotte, the first graphic I see is Ja Morant scores the most points, 34, in a return after missing 25 straight games in an NBA season. Have you, Charlotte, in your infinite wisdom and great coverage of basketball, figured out who else even qualifies for that list that TNT tried to sell us on?
No, because why on earth is that a road that you want to go down? Because you know the stuff that guys probably did to get that? It's not something that you want to be out here trumpeting. It's also, this is peak stat graphic where it's like, you know, it would be like Charlotte Wilder became the first person to appear on GoJo and Golic with Christmas decorations from the Meadowlark office in a black sweater. It's like the qualifiers were already a joke, and now it's like, are you kidding me? Just don't. What if you just didn't? What if you didn't turn it into a look how amazing this is?
Yeah.
Well, to your point in the Charlotte is 25 game suspensions are normally not the stars of the league where they're going to come back and light one up. Like, I'll say Draymond is a star. Draymond Green's a star in the league, but he's not a player like this. Draymond is probably going to be gone for maybe 25 games, so he'll be the next sampling of this.
I don't even think so.
And let's just say he is. My point is he's not coming back and scoring 34. He's not going to be doing that. That's what I would like to know, Mike, to your point. What's the sample size? Who are the other players? What are we working with? Because in all sports we have these wacky, you know, on a Tuesday at night on turf or on real
our
grass.
Producer Brandon
when it's
Newman calls them
raining.
ESPN baseball stats, since baseball's the sport that most lends itself to this, with all the different iterations that you can have. And obviously the folks over at ESPN Stats and Info always did a phenomenal job, and I appreciate them.
There you go. Exactly right. But that's what I want to see. I want to see a sampling of players who have been in that position. So I would imagine if we dig hard enough, we'd find it. But I don't think any of us cares enough to dig far enough to worry about this. Instead, just talk about Ja Morant's comeback and how this offense had been the worst Charlotte in the entire NBA. He comes back, has a monster game after C.J. McCollum just absolutely bricks a three at the end of the game. He gets the ball and hits the game-winning buzzer and then yells, "We'll get to it. I kept receipts afterward." But from the game standpoint, Charlotte, outside of him having to take an inhaler through the game because he got winded a little bit, you know, we know what he is on the court, and we've seen what he is off the court and what's got him into trouble, but we know what he can do on the court.
Well, I think the fact that he came back and was able to do this in his first game back, he said it himself. He hasn't played basketball for 8 months. And so I think that, you know, part of the story is how are we framing this and how do we want to talk about it, which is why that graphic and that stat becomes interesting, because it's like, if this guy's the future of the league, one game, you know, future of the league, they asked him about that in the court testimony where he was, or the hearing for, about how he punched a teenager on his own home basketball court. So, you know, but if he is to be the future of the league, and he said this himself, even in a press conference recently, he was like, it doesn't matter what I say. All that matters is what he doesn't do. We know what he can do. We know what he's capable of. And the fact that he did that in his first game back was, you could not have scripted that better. But now it becomes a question of, okay, is he able to keep it together off the court? Because it's often harder to control somebody not doing something than it is being like, hey, this is a generational talent. I miss watching him. I had missed it. His hang time's insane.
Yep.
He takes off from the locker room and makes it to the basket without taking a step. Like, it is a beautiful thing. So I just want that to be able to continue, but it's really up to him, and it's not really about something you're going to see in the next game. It's about, can they make it to the playoffs, and can he not be the news story outside of the court?
Yeah, I think you saw in this game, too, like all the star stuff that you'd expect. 27 of his 34 points came in the second half. They were kind of trying to manage his minutes at the beginning, and then just things went the way they went in this game. And you're right, Charlotte. He's one of the players. He's so explosive. He's so fast. He's so powerful. He breaks math, right? We talk about angles all the time in sports, and you see angles don't matter. He gets a rebound underneath the basket. It doesn't matter who's around him. He's going to get up there quicker than you'd expect and evade blocks. He's going to get to the rim like he did on that last shot and be able to hang up there and suspend gravity. Everything about Ja, the player that came back, is exactly why we were all so bummed out and upset when all of this was happening in the first place. Because remember, going back to this conversation about what got Ja to this point, to your point, Charlotte, about the nature of who else would qualify for a suspension like this, we always go back to, well, why did you miss all these games? It wasn't like a player who missed 25 straight games due to an injury and then came back and was able to do all of this. The context of this matters. Ja missed 25 games because of Ja and because of no one else. And so he didn't overcome anything to get back to that point that he didn't create. That's why, Jesse, I was so weirded out last night where we got Ja Morant sprinting off the court after the game, yelling about receipts.
Yeah, definitely kind of awkward to hear him yelling about receipts as he comes off. He was feeling good, though. Here's what he had to say about the game winner post-game.
Felt like it was the perfect, ending, perfect day, being able to come back and play and also deliver, a game winner for us to win the game. I feel like, in this world, a lot of us make mistakes. And I feel like my message, the message they got, from mine is that regardless, if you make a mistake, you just, have another chance to, fix it and, reinvent yourself.
And so hearing that right there, that's encouraging that Ja Morant
Good answer.
Yeah, that's what you'd hope to hear at this point. And that's what we're all rooting for, right? Like, no one looked at what Ja did and said, this should be the end of his career. And nobody looking at this situation, I shouldn't say nobody, but the vast majority of people looked at this situation and go, we hope that this stuff that Ja has brought to the forefront, that Ja in so many of the situations involving the firearms, involving the situation with the young man in his house, all things that Ja can easily avoid putting himself in the situation to become a thing. We all hope those become a non-factor going forward because, like Charlotte said, we want to see the guy play basketball. The worry just becomes when you see the video of him running off the court yelling, I kept receipts, Charlotte, is this notion that everything, and this is the peak sports brain, right, as an athlete, where everything on and off the court, no matter what the source or cause of it was, becomes this source of a chip on your shoulder, becomes this thing that you can use as fuel for on-court production. And it's like the old Saban tool of you use anything at your disposal to create this perception of doubt in your ability when that's never been what this was about with Ja.
No, at the same time, I think that in the heat of the moment, I don't know. I think that it's hard to talk about this with both accountability and some level of compassion for what it's like to be a public figure and to go through to be so famous so young and the forces that come with that. And it's hard to hold all of these things in your head at once. And I'm by no means saying that anything Ja did was outside of his control or was something that somebody else made him do. I do think that when you are Ja Morant, I would imagine being in that situation where you just hear over and over all the, people like us talking about him and talking about, well, when he comes back, what will it be like? Can he sustain this? Blah, blah, blah. There probably is a part of you that gets a little bit calloused to that outside noise, and he probably carried that with him, and it came out in that sort of way. And that's another thing that he's going to have to be careful about, that he's going to have to manage, because those feelings, too, are what he has to be able to compartmentalize in order to not go down the road of sort of things bubbling up and boiling over again. And I think it's a very complex human situation to be in, but I think it's a very straightforward sports basketball situation, which is that he's just got to keep it together.
So to your point, Mike, I agree. Players look for anything to have a chip on their shoulder. And if this works for him and it works on the basketball court, great. Charlotte, to your point, I agree. He is a guy who is next 24. I'm not going to call him, a kid. He's not. He's an adult. He's a grown man. But the thing about it is, things he did before he was in the spotlight, he's doing the same things, and now it's in the spotlight and it gets treated differently, right? So if he was used to doing some things where nobody cared because he wasn't in the spotlight, all of a sudden his employers, the NBA, care. And now it's a different story. And now you have to watch yourself. Because remember when he first came back, he never said he regretted what he did, right? I don't think there was contrition. And I'm not sitting here saying that's what I need. That's what I need. I don't care. I love him on the basketball court. What he does at his own time is his own time. But there are rules to follow if you're going to be employed by somebody, who we're employed by, who we've been employed by. And there are rules you have to follow. And he has broken those rules, and he's gotten suspended for it. So the only person this is on is him. So things he may have been used to doing now are not okay anymore, and he's got nailed for it, and he's got suspended for it. So does he learn? He can say whatever he wants. He can keep his receipts. I don't care. I don't care what he says to motivate himself. I love watching him on the basketball court. I have no idea what he does off the basketball court, but that's up to him now. It's always been up to him, whether he regrets it or not. And like a lot of players or people not even in sports, sometimes you don't regret your action. You regret you got caught. Right?
But I guess the worry with that is, Dad, if he doesn't, the notion of regret here is not tied to I need you to feel remorse. It's how likely is this to happen again becomes the worry.
Right. No, I agree. That's exactly what I'm saying. So whether he regrets it or not, whether he's keeping receipts or not to help him on the court, great. But this still all boils down to the same thing. You know what your employer doesn't want you to do, or you're going to be off the court. Can you do that? I don't care what you say, and I know you're in front of a microphone, so you have to say something, but like most things, it's as old as time. It's about your actions, not your words. And so far, your actions haven't been too good that have got you in this position. So what are your actions going forward? And the only one that can control them is him. So that's that.
I was just saying, it's the lowest bar to clear, though. That's the one thing I do want to say with Josh. We're just asking you to not flash guns on Instagram. That's literally the base of what we're asking.
And I know he's 24 and he's young and everything. And I know Charlotte made a good point about it's the heat of the moment. And then when he got to the podium afterwards, he had a more even-keeled response. But to GoJo's point, it's in that moment, you kind of get a flash of he has this attitude of you thought you had me, but here I am. And it's he still has this little bit of an attitude where it's a chip on his shoulder where he felt like it was unfair. And I think that's the issue, right? Is have you mentally accepted that you are the only person who was responsible for what happened to you?
Yeah, but
this is
Charlotte, I think to your point before, we see and perceive what all of our thoughts are individually on Ja, or the people that we have on our timeline, or the people we watch on TV. So it's people we respect, we curate it for ourselves, that say, all right, hey, we're criticizing Ja because we want to see the best of the player. I'm sure there's some people that took it too far. I'm sure there's some people that took it to criticism of basketball or really tried to go at his character, any number of things. And he hears everything as the person who's the subject of all this in the middle of the storm. And so he can pluck from any of those things and treat it all as outside noise attacking me, and thus I'm battling back against that when the rest of us don't feel like we've been working against Ja. We've been wanting to see the best of Ja, Charlotte.
Right, which is why part of talking about this is difficult, because nothing matters right now. Nothing we say, nothing Ja says, nothing his teammates say, nothing Taylor Jenkins said. Absolutely none of this matters unless Ja Morant does not make the same mistakes he's made in the past. And the only way to know if that happens is to go forward in time, and we can't do that. So it becomes a game by game, week by week. Can he sustain this? What is this looking like? And I think the fact, from a basketball standpoint, the Grizzlies are cooked in terms of injuries. They don't have Steven Adams. Marcus Smart has been hurt. I could list an endless number of names who've been hurt, and these guys are up against it in a way that for Ja to come back, there's also you just get a sense of, oh my God, the amount of responsibility from a basketball standpoint that is on this one player is absolutely enormous. So he has an opportunity here to go out and prove that he can actually carry a team on his back if they're able to get a winning record out of all this. But that's also a lot of pressure. So how does he react under that? And at the end of the day, we're just not going to know until he continues to not do that. And that's a much harder thing to talk about, or it's not as easy to compartmentalize and understand as like, well, a metric that you can, it's a negative. It's not a positive. It's if he doesn't do something as opposed to if he does.
I maybe sometimes I'm too simple with this. I love watching him play basketball. What he does off the court is his business. I'm not going to lecture him. You know what? I lectured you kids when I was growing up. You were my kids. I looked over you and gave advice and opinions. Ja Morant's a grown man. Ja Morant knows what he can and can't do. If he chooses to not do it and play basketball, great. I get to watch him on the court. If he chooses to make those mistakes that get him off the court, that's on him. You know what? I just want to watch a guy play basketball. His choice whether he's on the court or not.
Yeah, I think we all agree with that. And now he announced his presence back on that court in a way that's going to invite a ton of conversation. Didn't limp back in with 12. He jumped back in with 34, and we're all going to talk about it. to GoJo and Golic. It looks so festive in here, but my heart is full of darkness because yesterday Aaron Rodgers indicated that he will not play again this season. So the 21-day practice window closes today if the Jets don't activate him.
means he's going to remain on injured reserve for the final 3 weeks. And I had hammered this drum that he was going to come back and play at least one snap of football just to prove a point. Not because I thought it was a good idea, not because I thought it made sense, but just because I think he's crazy and I thought he was going to do it. And it turns out I was wrong because he appeared on the Pat McAfee show and said a return to action would have been an absolute no-brainer for a playoff game, but he's just still not feeling 100%.
If I was 100% today, I'd be definitely pushing to play. But the fact is, I'm not. I've been working hard to get closer to that, but I'm still, 14 weeks tomorrow from my surgery, and being medically cleared as 100% healed is just not realistic at 14 weeks.
Okay, so I'm wrong. I admit that I'm wrong. But can I just say...
Okay, there was the but.
Can I just say...
Yeah.
What he said on the Pat McAfee show is like the opposite of what he's been saying in his appearances since he got injured.
Jesse, I love so much that you think Aaron Rodgers would do something according to logic and what makes sense and proving a point. This guy is an agent of chaos. He does not care about backing up anything he says. He says things that he then doesn't have to back up. He says things that don't have basis. He says whatever he says so that people will be talking about him and so that he will come off as this sort of mysterious, aloof, maybe I will, maybe I won't. He drives me insane in that regard. And I didn't think for a second, if he came back for a playoff game, okay, sure. He's good. He's going down right after that. Like that is such a wild thing to do for an Achilles, that it just, he says whatever he has to say to be the most incendiary version of himself.
He does, but, and I'll get to the but in a minute. Jesse, Mike and I keep receipts.
Yeah.
You yelled at Mike and I.
You did.
Yelled at Mike and I about this. So what Mike and I have not heard yet is, hey, GoJo and Golic, I'm sorry for yelling at you the way I did. Are we going to hear that?
I'm not sorry for yelling. That's content. That's good content.
That is showbiz.
Wait, that's showbiz, right, baby. What, you want me to be all meek and I ain't apologizing.
All right, I was hoping.
Yeah,
and
no,
Charlotte,
I would say you were hoping incorrectly here. Jesse is rightly a student of the take game here.
Yes.
And it's like the fight game when we talk about UFC and all that stuff where you basically get to say anything in front of the microphone no matter how problematic it is. Yep. Jesse's allowed to say whatever she wants here no matter how wrong the take is and pop off here because that's the take game.
It was wrong.
That's exactly right. And Charlotte, to your point, listen, I agree about Aaron. He loves to be the headline, loves to be talked about, but he always made the secondary thing, and he did say it quite a bit, if we're in contention. He always led with, I want to play, and I think I'll be able to play. And by the way, maybe this new Achilles surgery might be a good new thing as we're getting new Tommy John surgeries and tightrope surgeries for the high ankle sprain, because he was doing things we have not seen people do with Achilles injuries. And he always did in a secondary way say, I want to play. I think I can play. The team has to be in it as well. We have to be but now that has flipped. That has now become the main headline is, well, I think I can play, but we're not in contention anymore, so I'm not going to play. He just kind of flipped the headline a little bit on him. To your point, as I said, I think you are correct. He does like to say things, be heard, be a headline. But I will say just on his behalf on this one, he has said all along, even though sometimes it was secondary, that the Jets do have to be in a playoff run for me to come back.
It's like reading the fine print, like when you have to click, I've read the terms of service on something. Yes. And we hardly ever read the terms of service because, to Charlotte's point, most of and really I think this is what informed a lot of what Jesse was talking about is the actual text of usually his McAfee appearances and really the clips we would all digest from that was, I'm doing something and trying to do something no one's ever done, pushing it to this way, working back to that point, and then the fine print is, but yeah, we'd have to be in contention. And I'd imagine there was probably a moment, and there were a lot of camera shots of Aaron Rodgers during the Dolphins game from this last weekend. I I'd imagine there was some point as he's watching Zach Wilson's head literally get bounced off the turf by the Miami D-line that basically took up residency in the Jets' backfield, where he's like, oh yeah, there ain't no way in hell I'm about to do that for who, for what, now that we're eliminated from the playoffs. Like, at some point, Charlotte's self-preservation takes over, even for a guy who was trying to push back, had to create these circumstances in his brain to try and create that one-track frame of mind to get to a point where this is even a conversation, and then reality snaps back in, and you got to get the hell out of that.
Well, I think my point is that fine print was doing a lot of heavy lifting, and it's very easy to say.
Yes.
You look at the Jets. Did anybody this season think they were making the playoffs? How convenient for Aaron Rodgers to be like, if we're in it, I'll play. You're not going to be in it, bud. You are not going to. There was that one moment maybe after Zach Wilson played better than Mahomes that we were like, could it be? And then it was like, absolutely not. And so for Rodgers, his team sort of became his own scapegoat. And I think that's just like, that's what he does. And it was, everything for him feels like he says things at a convenient time. And so I think that's where it drives me a little bit crazy. But you know.
Yeah, he can do that. He can definitely do that. There's no doubt about it. Because Mike and I vehemently disagreed with Jesse. We never thought, even if they were in the playoff picture, I don't think he was coming back. I do not think he would be on the field coming back. And just to think to come back and play next week, they're playing Cleveland. I mean, you think he'd go out on the field with Myles Garrett out there? I mean, it would be. And at one point when he said, I don't think re-injuring it would set me back. What? I mean, are you kidding me? As I said last week, the best thing the Jets can do is just take his helmet and hide his helmet. Do not let him back out on the field and save him for next year. So, as I said, Charlotte, I agree. He's a headline guy, loves the headline. He loves being the story. And it fit conveniently to have that, I feel good to come back. I'm out here throwing in the pocket. You know, I haven't done any 11 on 11 yet, but I'm throwing in the pocket. Oh, we're not going to be in the playoffs. So I could have come back. And it's one of those things. He's not the first or the last to do something where we couldn't prove one way or the other, right? We couldn't prove whether he could come back or not. None of us believed he could, but it was never in a position where he couldn't. And so we don't know. And that's what he was living on.
Yeah, it largely feels like it was an attention grab, and that's something that we've become accustomed to there. It's interesting to consider this on the same day that we're going to see the Ja Morant clips and sound bites debated all over the place, because we've had two guys that have not been on their field or court for a long time for various reasons. On one side with Aaron Rodgers, we've had overexposure. We've got so much Aaron Rodgers content and statements and appearances that we can sift through and find words to support our argument, because he's given everyone words to support their argument along the way, that it becomes maddening to talk about. Much in a different way with Ja, we've got one game back, one sliver of a soundbite, him running off the court, and we're going to try and mine that sliver for every bit of content and reaction that we can over the course of a 24-hour news cycle, when that's how it works. When in actuality, the more I sat here and thought about it during the break, what a ridiculous thing that I'm going to try and debate Ja's level of contrition based off a sliver of a soundbite there, when it's like Charlotte said, it's going to be borne out over time. With Aaron, we've at least seen it borne out over a long period of time, where all of this has been given us so we know exactly how he feels, and we can see the inconsistencies that have been there along the way.
So we get a lot of non-football talk now on the rest of the appearances on Pat McAfee show, right? When Aaron comes on, because there's no football to talk about because the Jets aren't going to be in it, and he's not coming back. So, you know, buckle up for what the conversations will be like.
God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change. I will say this also probably going to end the Jets football conversation for most of the rest of the year. Yeah. So congratulations to everybody in the New York media. We were able to milk this entire thing for all it was worth. New York business is good for all of us business. And now we finally get to put the Jets to bed for the season.
GoJo and Golic in our festive little set that we are just so cozy and enjoying so much. Let's talk about CJ Stroud, okay? He missed Sunday's win over the Titans, remains in concussion protocol, likely to miss his second straight game this coming Sunday against the Browns. So Case Keenum is in line for another start. The year of the backup continues. And Charlotte, there's so many stories to choose from here about just like backups and what we're loving about them right now. Do you have a favorite?
Oh, Jesse, I thought you'd never ask. Yeah, it's my boy Tommy DeVito. Over here in the New York Football Giants. Tommy, I can't really get enough of this, I guess I could get enough of it when he did not play well against the Saints. But I just think the whole thing is so fascinating. And I actually had a friend of mine from college, shout out to Alex, messaged me on Instagram because I've done a lot on Tommy DeVito in the last week. And he said, I think that every team should have either 1 week where a hometown grown quarterback has to play quarterback, or every team has to have their third string quarterback needs to be from that area, so that you just get like the most stereotypically New York or New England or the most Ohio person you've ever seen being the third string backup for Cincinnati. And I actually think that that's one of the better takes I've heard in a long time, because think of the joy that Tommy DeVito and his New Jerseyness has brought everybody watching him play football in New Jersey.
Well, and think about the butts it's put in seats. We had the shots from the Carolina Panthers game against the Falcons this last weekend that made me sadder than anything I'd seen in a while. It was like playing in pandemic-era arenas again for a lot of the guys on the field out there. And for the New York Giants, who aren't that far removed, now they had a 3-game win streak as opposed to the dreck that the Panthers have mustered up lately, but they've been bad this year. They were a team that made the playoffs last year that had all this hope that went sideways after Daniel Jones got injured. And Dad, now they at least have something to sell to people who want to come and eat chicken cutlets with Tommy's family in the parking lot.
Listen, it's a great story, and the biggest question I think is going to be, how long does this story last, right? Where is Tommy DeVito next year? That's going to be the thing. Joe Flacco might be back on the couch, may want to stay in the league. Who knows? Jake Browning is solidifying himself, as the for sure backup behind Joe Burrow. Gardner Minshew just keeps ensuring himself of having a job until he's 50 for what he's doing in Indianapolis. So DeVito is the biggest story of, we didn't know who the hell this kid was, and now look what he's doing. His family has played into it. Now all of a sudden you have a lot of attention on you, and you get a little controversy going on now, the whole Pizzagate thing happening. But to me, it's still, DeVito's the great story, but from a team aspect, I look for one where a backup is helping a team get to the postseason. So that's not Tommy DeVito. That's not Tyson Bagent, who came in for a little while with his dad, the world arm wrestling champ that he was. Drew Lock, it hasn't been a whole lot lately. You got Jake Browning is 3-1. I believe, as a starter. You got Joe Flacco is 2-1 as a starter, and both these teams, while Cincinnati trying to get in, they're in the 6 slot. Cleveland's in the 5 slot, and they continue to stay there when their backups, in this case in Cleveland, their 4th quarterback. Now, they were 7-4 before he started, but now they're 9-5. So he's keeping them going to the playoffs. So those stories, Charlotte, to me, are more in the overall scheme, more important and bigger, because they're coming in and helping their team either jump up into the playoffs like Browning has for Cincinnati, or stay right where they are in the 5 slot like Cleveland. The Tommy DeVito story, to me, the biggest question is, what happens to him next year? Where is he going to be, and where does this story go?
But we're only going to care so much, because right now this is a bit of Stockholm syndrome with all the injured quarterbacks we have, where we've got to find something, and we're looking so many directions and seeing so many more, like CJ Stroud, 2 weeks in a row now, being out. The guy who's the likely offensive rookie of the year sucks. And so what are we doing? We're looking for anything else. We're getting fun stories week to week. It's very college football in a way, the way we're going around and mining this. But this all exists, by the way, and I do want to say, this is a quarterback that gets talked about and is such a lightning rod right now because he has ascended so quickly. This is Brock Purdy's America. The reason we're entertaining any of this as, oh, I wonder what this could be, is because last year, this was Brock Purdy. Like, he was not supposed to be this, and then a bunch of injuries all of a sudden netted us a guy who got an opportunity at the helm of a team and went out there and did more with it than anyone could have possibly imagined, and now has become not just a full-fledged starter, but a guy that's getting MVP conversation. We can talk about the context of it. All of those things matter and are appropriate, but this is also, I think, what's made this year more interesting, because whether or not people realize it, the reason we're giving credence to any of this, I think, is because we have a very recent example of someone coming from this kind of situation and having more success than anyone could have possibly predicted.
Michael, yes, absolutely. Shout out to Brock. You are forgetting, though, a little-known quarterback by the name of Tom Brady, who people forget was taken 199th in the NFL draft in the 6th round. No, I'm just kidding. I had to say that. I'm from Boston. But I think you're exactly right that the fact that Brock did this is why we think, oh, it's like, oh, so you're saying there's a chance? 60% of the time works every time. It's like, okay, well, I think that also Tommy DeVito, he won 3 games. He played pretty well. Sure, he made smart plays under pressure. Like, he took the shorter, easier pass to lead these drives, which as a backup is sort of all you can ask for. And I think that the details of the story and the way that it resonated locally as, oh, we know this guy, we've seen this guy. Like, they really literally went down to a local prep school and picked somebody who could throw a football because that's where Tommy DeVito went. So I think that those stories are what's really fun. Yes, I think what happens to him next year is interesting, but I do think we need quarterbacks from local markets who grew up there to be on those teams, because I would like to see, someone with a really thick Boston or really thick Maine accent be out there for the Patriots, because God knows we need some joy this year.
I love that thought, Charlotte. I think that is great. The emergency quarterback being a local person, I think that is really an awesome idea. Quickly, we should put a bow on the pizza situation for Tommy DeVito and what we talked about yesterday. He was supposed to have an appearance at a pizzeria, and between his agent, Sean Stellato, supposedly it was for $10,000, and then his agent asked to double that to $20,000. Tommy DeVito said he kind of heard about the flap, and he went down to the pizzeria and made good on that. He said, I need to be down here, and so he kind of made good on that situation. And then after that, he actually hired somebody new to handle his marketing. So his agent will handle the agent part. The Stellato who's been getting plenty of airtime and who I met in the airport in Detroit after the Detroit-Denver game. He will now just be negotiating the contract for Tommy. Tommy has a new marketing person now to handle that. So the two, this doesn't happen again. But good on Tommy, Mike, for going down to that pizzeria and not, because we know the position he's in, it was nice of him to go make good on something like this.
Yeah, I think, and everyone who's dealt at some point with representation has also dealt with the idea that at some point, like, all right, there's the business side of it, you want to do all that, and then at some point you sit up and realize, like, oh, wait a minute, I told this pizza place that I was going to come and sign autographs and hang out, and they were going to give me $10,000. And I'm living at home with my parents, and I wasn't sure I was actually going to be in this position ever. And $10,000 to go hang out at a pizza place is awesome. I probably need to take $10,000 and go hang out at the pizza place for a little bit while. And that becomes kind of an easy out with that. So I'm glad cooler heads prevailed. And yeah, I mean, for the Sean Stellato part, for people that want to make anything out of the agent, there's a lot of guys that have a different marketing agent and a different actual football agent.
Absolutely.
So it's not like they're on the rocks.
He just saw a window closing, guys. He said, I don't know how long this is going to last. I got to make as much money for my boys as I can.
Which is his job, by the way.
Yes,
every agent's job is to make their client as much money as humanly possible and to have the tough conversations. It's their own version of good cop, bad cop. And Sean Stellato had to go in and be the bad cop here. And so now what happens on the other side? We get the redemption story. Makes you wonder, was this the plan all along? Sean Stellato has to go in and ruffle some feathers. Tommy DeVito gets to come in and be the hero now. By the way, don't believe Tommy DeVito tweets you see from weird blue check accounts that aren't real. All right, I want to preface this by saying I am having a great time in Boston here at the studio at DraftKings. Everyone here is lovely. It's so great to see everyone that we work with every day in person. But I want to kick someone's ass right now because you guys are sabotaging me, my goals for my body in the new year, and overall my sense of self because I've got cookie dust in my throat right now. And I'm dying because right before this, we thought, oh, it's so fun. It's a Christmas theme. Mike kind of looks like Santa sitting in this big chair. Why don't we get him a glass of milk and a bunch of cookies here on the plate? That'll be a fun prop to have there. Forgetting that the cookies are edible and I'm a reformed fat. And so what happens is, during every segment, I sit here trying to munch on cookies. And then we get to break, and I'm munching on more cookies. And now I can barely talk, Jesse, because I have so many cookies in my throat. Please help.
Yeah. So we had a full plate of cookies right there, and we had some milk, and it looks like we're going to need a refill on the milk at least.
I got water.
Oh, he's got water. Okay, we're okay.
How can you blame anybody else? How can you sit there and blame? Are they forcing them down your throat?
No, Senior, I get it. I can't have cereal in my house because I'll just eat an entire family size box of cereal. So I can't have it in my house. So I get it. The cookies are right there. Okay? They're right next to him and he has no self-control.
I just say, I fully admit it. I have impulse control issues. I have no self-control when it comes to things like this. My body's addicted to sugar. I kind of blame you for that, to be honest. There's, things we can talk about there.
Was that story about having monkey bread every morning before school?
Oh man, was that good monkey bread. My mom used to make us monkey bread every morning, which is basically just maple syrup covered French toast in a giant ball.
I mean,
I want it.
I want
it's incredible.
that.
I have to say, since you mentioned you can't do that with cereal, I have to throw my daughter-in-law Jenny under the bus. How terroristic is this, Charlotte? Lucky Charms, she reaches into Lucky Charms and eats all the marshmallows.
Oh, no.
And then puts the box back. So basically you don't have the true Lucky Charms. She eats all the marshmallows out of them and puts the regular cereal back. That's horrible.
Look, you got to look out for yourself in this life, Senior. As somebody who has, oh no.
I mean, seriously. You know what? At least the milk is doing my body good. I don't know where we're at in the scientific advancement of the medical community's view of milk, Charlotte, but I'm still operating on dated software that's like, oh, milk is good. Bones, me drink.
That's because our generation
I've been on
got fed that. We're do you remember being force fed a tall glass of milk every night with your dinner? Because I do.
I chose it. I had real fears as a child that when I was too little to be able to pour the milk, I remember crying to my mom, how am I going to have kids someday if I can't pour milk? And she was like, I think you'll grow up and be able to do it.
Big Milk was telling us that our bones were just going to snap.
Charlotte, how old were you when you said that?
Yeah.
Probably 4 or 5.
You were that concerned, very concerned about your future children at age.
You really were.
Listen, I've been worrying about everything you could possibly worry about since I was old enough to be sentient. So shout out to my brain for that one.
Nice.
Oh my God. Well,
wow.
All right, so we've had a lot of anxiety here. I almost just spilled milk all over the studio. It's a lot going on in here. So instead, I want to celebrate somebody else who, instead of having impulse control issues surrounding cookies in the morning, went out there and controlled what they could control and hung a banner because of it. Charlotte, we got to see the in-season tournament banner go up for the Lakers. And I'm not going to lie, when I saw the actual banner, I made fun of it a lot. Looked up at it. Pretty cool banner. They did a good job with that one. I'm actually be proud to have that hanging in the rafters, even though it now Crypto, then Staples, has way more history and way more accolades that they should be celebrating in there. It actually was a pretty cool looking banner.
Yeah, it looks like something from medieval times, which I'm always into. I also do think, though, that, sure, we can make fun of this, but at the end of the day, and I feel like I've said this on here before, the in-season tournament is something that the NBA wants us to take seriously, that I think they proved is worthy of being taken seriously, and that provides a stage that we can have people break through on. And the fact that we are so blessed to still be watching LeBron James play dominant basketball in his 21st season, that banner, I think, does end up meaning a little bit more. And so I think it's great to put it up. I also think they said that they were going to do, if they win again or when LeBron wins it again in 20 years, they'll put just the year date. They won't hang a new banner every time. But you know what? I love the in-season tournament. I want everybody to get into this. So hang the banner.
it'll basically look like the banners in high school. They don't give you another banner. They just put another year on the same banner. That's
Conference
what they would do.
champions, 2018, 2019.
Charlotte, I agree 1,000% with what you said. I am one of those converts that started out like, what the hell are we doing, to, wow, this is cool. I am enjoying this. And I was glued to the TV, especially in the semis and the finals of this. But let me ask you this question. Truthfully answer it. If the league didn't want or make them put up a banner, would they have put up a banner?
I feel like LeBron could have been like, hey, this is something that the league wants us to care about. We should do it. I don't know what went on behind the scenes there. But I could see a team actually wanting to put that up. I don't know.
I do like that it is situated, and you see on it, it just says champions in big bold letters, and the in-season tournament is really small. It's like when Penn State put out that graphic that said a Penn State player has played in every Super Bowl ever except for the years, blank, 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 and blank.
Yeah.
That's what they're trying to do here. And Dad, I don't know if they would have put it up or not. Part of me thinks, like Charlotte mentioned, this could actually be a great plot twist for LeBron James, who's always been the master of when things aren't going right for him on the basketball court, deflecting to other things, right? It's bigger than basketball. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a leader in my community. I'm an in-season tournament champion. And so even if the actual NBA title eludes the Lakers at this point, LeBron James, maybe he just makes his late career living into his 40s by winning in-season tournaments and then petering off after that. When you think about it, it's at the perfect time for him. He's never going to be healthier or more well-rested than he is at the beginning of the season. It's at the end of the year where being almost 40 years old hurts him.
Charlotte, does this go into the after the comma, LeBron James, comma, X amount of championships, X amount of, all NBA teams, everything, all the things, all the accolades? Does in-season tournament champion go on that list?
Listen, as LeBron himself said, records can be broken, but you can only ever be the first to do something once. So inaugural in-season tournament champion, absolutely.
It's already on his Wikipedia page. I just looked. It's under the career highlights and awards. NBA in-season tournament champion and NBA in-season tournament MVP. So it has it is right below four-time NBA most valuable player. So that's how high up on the list this has gone.
I think they should have had a parade, but
You would.
Sorry, I like a good time.
Yeah, from Boston, you get a
Boston.
parade every other year. So I bet, you'd like a parade, right?
Yeah, Los Angeles will lend you the duck boats.
The year we finally get a matchup in the in-season tournament of the Lakers and the Celtics, which we in theory could have had this year. But watching the way the NBA tries to sell that as if it's akin to like Bird and Magic meeting in the finals for all those years is going to really be the height of professional basketball.
I mean, gosh, the Celtics. They're so good, and then they go and do things like lose to the Warriors, and Tatum and Brown just fall apart again. I don't know. They give me heartburn. Even I'm almost more worried because they're so good. So Christmas Day, where the Celtics and the Lakers face off, maybe that'll be the start of the new branding that they're so hoping works.
Listen, I know the headline was John Morant. He hits the game winner, but you just said it. That Celtics Golden State game, what a game that was. Holy smokes. Yeah. I mean, Steph, after breaking his streak since, 2018 of hitting a three, is just bombing threes in this one and hits a winner as well. I mean, that was a hell of a game, that Steph said, hey, maybe this can start to turn our season around. We'll see.
I can't imagine the sadness of being the team that knows they've got to play Steph after that streak comes to an end. Yeah. Where we're like, oh my God, he's just going to shoot the lights out of the gym now. You know it's coming. Charlotte Wilder shot the lights out of the gym today the way she always does on a Wilder Wednesday. Everybody make sure you check out Oddball every day but Monday with Charlotte Wilder and me and El Hassan, giving you all the coverage of the NBA that you could possibly ask for. Charlotte, thanks so much, bud.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. The Saints and Rams are going to kick off Week 16 action on Thursday, and this is a game with massive playoff implications, okay? Rams sitting at 7th in the NFC. Saints are in 8th. So, fellas, what do we think about this matchup? What do we think about the NFC playoff picture as it stands right now?
I need the Rams to make this really badly. Dad, I've been calling it since the beginning of the season. Honestly, going back to when the Rams played the 49ers close, I went, this looks fun. And at that point, we were just kind of getting into the Puka Nacua mania there. Kyron Williams from Notre Dame, I don't think it started necessarily going off the way we've seen yet. And the young players on defense were just starting to sort of fill out their roles around Aaron Donald, who was the last remnant, really, of that Super Bowl outfit from a few years ago. Now that Stafford and Kyron Williams are back healthy on that offense, it's one of the most exciting in the NFL. Matthew Stafford is playing some of the best quarterback that there is in the league right now. So I need this team. In a year where we have been marred by quarterback injury everywhere, where some of the teams like the Philadelphia Eagles that we expected to do certain things and have fallen short of that standard recently, I'm looking for potential to buy into, and I want to buy Rams playoff potential.
You know, it's one of those things that the Rams have obviously shown it in winning Super Bowl a few years back. But having that offensive talent, having it come through, because we say that about the other LA team, right? The Chargers. We see them with offensive talent, but they never can really pull it through like they have with the Rams. And I'm looking forward. I get to call this game, so I'll be out in LA tomorrow to do it. Two teams that are absolutely battling. Now, you sit there and look at New Orleans, which we'll get to. 7-7 Tampa Bay, 7-7 New Orleans, 6-8 Atlanta. I mean, that's still a battle for the top spot. And New Orleans, after this game, plays Tampa Bay and Atlanta. So that's all going to figure itself out because you're only going to get one. That's the one thing in the South. You know you better win the division because that's it. You're not getting a wild card out of the NFC South. At least I don't believe you are going to. So for the Rams, and I know you've said them, and then it's like the Bills, right, that you said in the AFC. I kind of went with Denver. You went with the Bills, and we saw where that went this past weekend. The Bills looked great. Denver did not. So, kudos to the Bills to work their way up there. And the Rams are playing good ball. Listen, Cooper Kupp missed all that time. He had the hammy. He's had an ankle in the past. But Puka Nacua has stepped up. He's 4th in the league, I believe, in receiving yards. He kind of has taken it by storm, being a rookie year, and us not really knowing who this guy is and what he's done. And Kyron Williams has been nothing but a fantasy player's dream with how he's – and he missed 4 games, and still what he's doing is incredible. So they are a team that's peaking at the right time, and that's what we talk about. Is it's not where you start, it's where you finish, and how are you injury-wise by the time you're getting to the end of the season. As we said, they're holding on to that last spot right now in front of Seattle, and for LA, they finish up New Orleans, obviously, tomorrow. Then they play the Giants, and then they play San Francisco. But San Francisco may have the number 1 seed locked up by then. If they have that locked up by then, I never blame a team if they want to rest. We get into that whole discussion. Is it fair to the rest of the league to rest your guys and the other team can win? That might knock somebody else out. My thought is you do what's right for your team. And if Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco is in that position and he wants to sit guys, then you go ahead and sit them. You get to do whatever you want. You've earned that right. So they might be in good shape there if San Francisco doesn't need that game to help keep them in the playoff picture right now where they are.
Well, and I mean, even if they're not, we've seen enough of the division games in the NFC West. Like even 2 games ago, the Seahawks were able to keep it close for a while against the 49ers, even if we never felt like they were necessarily in danger of losing that game. And the impetus, the entire origin story of this Rams team this season was, hey, they played the 49ers really close early in the season before any of the injury stuff even affected the 49ers. All of it for me just goes back to, Dad, I am also, and we've talked like the coach of the year conversation has been sort of like this chaotic way to just celebrate a coach who's doing really well in any given week. I'm sure overall it's probably going to end up going to DeMeco Ryans, and deservedly so, given the backdrop of that team. Sean McVay's won a Super Bowl. Sean McVay's been a part of teams that have been great during the regular season. He's been a talked about coach since he burst onto the scene with the Rams. But the job that he has done, coming from where we're hearing these stories reported of him mulling retirement during off seasons to a point where he's come back and then worked through a massive transition transition for this team. Worked through an overhaul of the core players that were there when he first got there. Worked through an overhaul of some of the skill guys and young players around Matthew Stafford and the core of this team, and gotten them back to a point where stylistically it's different. The plays that they're majoring in are certainly different in a lot of ways than the original identity of that team. I think it's an incredible testament to Sean McVay and his ability to adapt and to do what we see so many great coaches do, which is find different ways to win and find ways to evolve, working with the constraints of your salary cap, of your draft choices, all the things that we know are baked into the Rams conversation.
Yeah, and you know, we'll sit there and talk about the offenses of this, because on the other side, you know, you have Olave and Kamara and what he's doing with Carr at quarterback. But it's these defenses, you know, and right now the Rams are in the lower part as far as giving up points, where I believe New Orleans is top 6 in giving up points on defense. So we always talk about offense and the firepower, but you have to start looking at defense as well and stopping it. For the Rams, kind of a down year sack-wise, just 30 sacks. Aaron Donald just has 6 right now. A lot of tackles for losses that he normally does. But looking at that defensive side, you know, and kind of the same thing for New Orleans, who has more. They have 14 interceptions on the year. The Rams, I think, only have 8 at this point. So that defense for New Orleans, I have always liked. They've been a bit inconsistent at times. That's the matchup and the side of the ball I'm really kind of looking forward to in this game, with the power on offense that the Rams are showing with Puka and with Kupp and with Kyron, and obviously with Stafford, you know, leading the way there, quarterback. What can the Saints defense do as a number 6 in scoring, giving up just 19 points a game? How good are they going to play against this offense?
Well, and number 8 in rush EPA allowed, so expected points average allowed against the run. So quality run defense going up against a Rams team that in some ways has become defined by what they can do up front, moving people off the ball, and a Rams team that also basically won a 1-score game against the Washington Commanders team that was starting Jacoby, or had Jacoby Brissett on the field by the end of that game. So they are not world beaters. They're not to the point where you could just automatically pencil them in. But I think there's enough of the framework of a really interesting team, especially when it comes to the postseason, to make that all work. That's a team that has found a way. That's a coach that has been in transition. And certainly it's different because they've got the quarterback. Like, everything that we're talking about around that works because you have healthy Matthew Stafford playing the kind of football that made Sean McVay go out and pry him out of Detroit to begin with. Jesse, we've got other teams that are in the fringe of the playoffs that are a very different situation, i.e. the Pittsburgh Steelers, where it seems like every week we hear more and more coming out of this team, both with what's gone on the field and off the field, that kind of seems like it's leaking fuel. Yeah,
this is a situation that has had issues on the field that, like you said, are now leaking into off the field. So wide receiver George Pickens, he took heat Saturday when he declined to block near the goal line on a run against the Colts, came up just short of a touchdown there. He said he was trying to prevent the Tank Dell situation, which it was a totally different situation, but I digress. And the drama is drama-ing, okay? So Pickens has received a lot of backlash, a lot of heat this season for expressing frustration on the field, getting upset. Mike Tomlin said that's something that he's spoken to him about. However, Pickens then told the media that ain't true.
George, Mike Tomlin said he talked to you about controlling your frustration. Did what he had to say to you resonate with you?
What it was, like 2 weeks ago? 3 weeks
Last week, I think.
Nah, he ain't say nothing about my frustration.
He said he's had that conversation with you, though, right?
Nah, I ain't never. Last week we played the Colts. I ain't had no conversation with Coach T, but let's get better. Let's keep working.
Ooh, not really what you want to see in that scenario. So you got Mike Tomlin saying he's come out and talked to him about his frustrations. You got Pickens saying that conversation never happened, and that is not great, guys.
Well, he went to semantics, right? The conversation happened a couple of weeks ago, and Pickens was hanging on the fact that, oh, you asked about last week? No, last week, no. So, I mean, listen, you watch the play, and it's by the goal line. He's lined up wide, and the play comes wide, and he's blocking on a guy, and he just lets him go as the play is coming toward him in the goal line. And the guy he was blocking or attempting to block and then gave up blocking on and quit blocking on, I'll keep using those terms because it really ticks me off, ends up being in on the tackle as well, and said, I didn't want a Tank Dell situation. And Jesse, you mentioned it. That was different. Tank Dell, it was a goal line play. He was in close to the line of scrimmage and got caught up in the wash in the end zone and hit from behind. And Pickens said, I didn't want that situation. Mike, you know what? This one aggravates the hell out of me. You got 10 people on that field busting their asses, and you got one guy that quits because he's thinking about himself and thinking, I might get hurt on this play, so I'm not going to continue with the block. That aggravates the hell out of me when something like that happens. And he admits it. He admits he quit on the play because he was thinking about not getting hurt. As a team sport guy all my life, and as someone who, whenever a player retires, said, what do you miss the most? I miss the locker room, the camaraderie, the team aspect of this thing. And you went out there and knowingly and selfishly quit on a play that was coming right. It's one thing, listen, I hate quitting on a play no matter what, but it's one thing if it's on the other side of the field, right? And you're nowhere near the play, and maybe you let your guy go because he's not going to get to the play, but you're also not in any danger of getting hurt on that play either. To admit that and to quit blocking when 10 other guys, as I said, are busting their asses out there aggravates the hell out of me. You know, and that's not old school. That's not new school. That's oh, here's the old guy yelling on the porch, get off my lawn. No. That you have a job to do, that you practice to do. That's your man to block. Block him. Block him so your guy can get into the end zone. Don't quit so that guy makes the tackle and you got out of that cleanly and didn't get hurt when you don't know if you would have gotten hurt. Well, I'm not going to lie. This one aggravates the hell out of me.
Well, I think the problem with this, too, is it fits into a larger conversation that's also gone on with this Pittsburgh Steelers wide receiver room where the emotions of George Pickens are one thing, but this is not the first time we've had a Steelers wide receiver accused of not giving proper effort. We had Deontay Johnson near the fumble on the field who looked like he was just walking past it, who had to address a lot of that. And, Dad, it's kind of led to this overall conversation. I saw Rich Eisen, who was on the call recently for a Pittsburgh Steelers game, so he had a lot of the meetings with players and got to talk to people, and he was talking on his show about the conversations he had with T.J. Watt, who said was pretty candid about the way certain players aren't receiving the message from Mike Tomlin right now and what he's trying to do, how T.J. Watt perceives some of the effort that they're seeing maybe in practice from other teammates there. And it does start to call into question. We've heard a lot more rumbling and friction around all-time great coaches this year, like Bill Belichick in New England and Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh, about what their futures look like in these situations. And, Dad, you do wonder if for some of this next generation of player coming up, the message isn't getting to them the same way that it's gotten to the Cam Haywards of the world and the guys in that locker room that have been there for a while.
You know, and I first, going back to the Deontay Johnson play, I first didn't think much of it because I thought maybe he thought the play was dead, and he thought his player was down and it wasn't going to be a fumble. It turned out to be a live ball. And the way you go about it is, if the ball's on the ground and you don't hear the whistle, get the hell on the ball. So the play wasn't over. It was a live fumble. And you're right, he did not go for it. And all I can say is, Mike, you know Mike Tomlin. I know Mike Tomlin. You played under him for a little bit, and I've known him for years. If this, in fact, is the case with some of these players and what T.J. Watt said, that they don't want to practice or practice like Mike Tomlin wants to do, Mike Tomlin's got to be in football hell. I mean, got to be in football hell for one of the most respected coaches to ever coach and to have this string of above 500 play. But to that point, I remember the late, great Marty Schottenheimer saying he thought it was about 10 years to where you kind of get to the point where guys start to tune you out a little bit, are looking over your shoulder, not really listening to you anymore. I don't know if that's the case now with Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. If it is, it's a shame because this guy has so much to offer, I think, out there. But it does, and I don't want to start saying the player of today, because then I do sound like that old guy on the porch.
But again, I do think there is a difference. Like, we've heard from enough people, and this is how it always is generationally. I remember when I was a young player trying to get into professional football and going through training camps, and I would sit around and listen. And even when I first got into TV and would sit around in the green room and listen to guys that had decade-long NFL's careers in the generation prior, they would always talk about the difference of the player that started showing up in the locker room late in their careers. And we hear this all the time. We heard about this from Matt Stafford going into the season. Remember his wife Kelly on her podcast saying Matthew was having a more difficult time trying to engage with his younger teammates because there is a difference, because there's always a difference in how different generations digest information. Hell, I had an old coach of mine send me a book that he had wrote about coaching Gen Z, about the things that he had noticed as someone coaching through the years that were different now with this particular generation of players. So I don't think that makes you old. I think that makes you observant because there are differences in this, and how you navigate them goes a long way.
And I guess if you continue to try and coach the old way, you're going to end up banging your head against the wall because seems to be a new way right now, right or wrong, however you look at it, because we can sit there and I can sit there and say, when I was in the film room for the Philadelphia Eagles, right or wrong, if that play showed up on film, where a player did that, and this may sound horrible to say, that player would have got dropped right there in the meeting room. I mean, literally would have gotten dropped. Now, and I'm not saying that's right or wrong either. I'm just, like we're talking now, that's how it was, certainly before me and when I was playing and for a time after me. And that time is different now. So is it up to the coach to adapt to the new player? Is it up to the player to say, you know what? Is this the right way to go about our business, to sit there and say, I'm just worried about getting injured, so don't ask me to block that guy. If all the plays coming behind me, then I'm going to go ahead and let that guy go so I don't get hurt. I mean, that stuff's hard to compute for me.
Yeah, I understand it. It's all very different. And I'm not saying, to be clear, that I think George Pickens was necessarily right or wrong in this situation. Right. But it's not an indictment of that, but it is more, I think, too, in this conversation, because it's going to be centered on Mike Tomlin and what he might or might not be able to do. We just had this conversation with Sean McVay. Part of this is also, man, sometimes it's just, do you have the quarterback or not in terms of top-end success? We've seen some teams this year be able to overcome that. It's not an excuse for everybody here. The Browns would like a word on their fourth quarterback still in playoff contention. The Bengals, like we talked about before, there are plenty of teams. We had this conversation with Diana about the Jets yesterday, how they seem to have used, once Aaron Rodgers went down, as nothing's going to happen. That hasn't been Pittsburgh. Like, Pittsburgh isn't New England. Pittsburgh's not the Jets. They're a team that's been in playoff contention most of the season. They're still flirting with that Mike Tomlin above 500 line. All those things are true, but the top-end success that tends to quiet a lot of this conversation, Dad, usually becomes a lot easier when you've just got that one position stabilized. And so part of me always wants to reserve any of the existential conversations we're going to have about this team and this franchise and Mike Tomlin, how much longer he wants to do this, until they get Kenny Pickett back healthy in the context of this new offense post-Matt Canada, to see what can actually happen outside of that one-game sample we had.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to sit there and say that in our locker rooms we were fighting all the time, because we weren't. But I'm just telling you what the thought process was, especially if Buddy Ryan was the head coach.
You guys were fighting a lot. Like, you're not overstating it. You guys fought a lot on that team because it was encouraged.
We were, and that would have been a situation where they were, let's just say I said would have dropped the guy. There would have been a very strong conversation that I don't know what would have led to, but there would have been a strong conversation. Speaking of words, I do like how Mike Tomlin has kind of laid out this year. And I don't know if you heard this line when you were playing under him, but his line of 1 week you're drinking wine, another week you're crushing grapes. And he said, we've been crushing a lot of grapes lately.
It is amazing. Like, Mike Tomlin has not lost all that often in his career, all the reasons we know, he's got a statement for everything. It is really remarkable that he always seems to have some sort of like, I don't know if it's an axiom or an idiom or whatever you call it, but he's got something for every statement. It's like I always say, famous people, one of the double-edged swords of that is there's enough Getty Images pictures of you to accompany every headline that could be written about you and look appropriate given the headline. Mike Tomlin has that, but for situations that pop up with a football team over the course of any long season.
It is so true, but where it ends up there in Pittsburgh, again, just 3 coaches since the 70s, going to be very interesting going forward. Because, again, if that's the attitude now of some of those players on that team, how Mike Tomlin deals with that going forward will be interesting.
And how the players deal with it. This is what I think Ben Roethlisberger was largely talking about when he talked about that Steelers standard of who's going to, especially on offense, hold players accountable when these situations pop up that seem far below their standard.
Back to GoJo and Golic. FSU is getting a little lesson in grudge holding here. Okay, they're still feeling that college football playoff exclusion, despite having a 13-0 record. Mike Norvell said a ton of Seminoles are struggling with the reality that an undefeated team was not enough to sway the committee.
For a group of young men that are having to work through that, it's probably been the most challenging couple weeks of coaching I've ever had. And, but it is our reality. So you work through it and you go push and get better. I will always have the feelings of what happened, but at the end of the day, I wasn't in that room and wasn't my choice. So my beliefs of what it is, that's that.
All right, guys, FSU going to face Georgia in the Orange Bowl on December 30th without a lot of their top players.
Yeah, both teams certainly. Like Georgia's had a bunch of guys portal out, and I'm sure has had a bunch of opt-outs. I haven't looked at their list totally yet, but For Florida State, Trey Benson, their running back, Johnny Wilson, their wide receiver, Fabian Lovett, their D tackle, Jaheim Bell, their tight end. I think I just saw Jared Verse, who's expected to be a top 15 pick, one of their edge rushers, just announced that he's going to opt out too. So the football scene, listen, we knew it was going to be tough for them. And going up against the Georgia team, but we know at least Carson Beck's coming back. They're going to have enough of the core pieces there that are going to make this a pretty difficult game for Florida State. But we'll see about that. Dad, this is more about, one, how they're processing it as a team, which is certainly a reality. Like, we have not seen this, and so we can't even think about experiencing what's gone on in that room and what that's like to try and digest when you've had that thrown in their lap. The other portion of that is, though, Dad, the response from Florida State overall as the school. So I want to get to that. Do you have anything for the team there? I don't want to brush past that without giving you a chance to empathize with the team.
The one thing I'll say is I would love everybody to know, and I've already said this, is because I heard so many people say, well, let's see what they do against Georgia, whether they belonged or not. That's the biggest load of crap out there for any of these bowl games. Mike just gave you a list of guys that are out for Florida State, and there could be more. That's just getting ready for the NFL. Then there are portal guys. Georgia's going to go through the same thing. You can tell zero from these bowl games of what should have happened to Florida State, whether they win this game or not, or any bowl game, because of the players that are out. It's opportunity for other players to step in and get a chance to play. It's opportunity for younger players to get more work in the 15 practices that you get before this. But that's my biggest thing, is do not put what happened to Florida State if they got beat by Georgia in this game. Say, see, they didn't belong anyway. That is garbage. That means nothing in this conversation of a team that I think still should have been in the Final Four.
Yeah, this isn't the next card coming out in the dealer at the blackjack table after you decided to double on cards that you shouldn't have or split cards that you shouldn't have here. This is an entirely different set of circumstances now in modern college football. So I think you're absolutely right about that, Dad. The other interesting portion of this that came up the other day with Florida State was off the field, and I saw Andrea Adelson at ESPN reporting on this. Nicole Arbach at The Athletic just put out a 3,000-word article detailing some of the conversations that are going on renewed amongst Florida State and their brass about their future with the ACC, which, Dad, as soon as this happened, as soon as we came off Selection Sunday in college football, you and I sat on this show and said, hey, Florida State had already been one of these 7 or so teams in the ACC that was kicking the tires on, all right, we know there's grant of rights, you kind of own our media rights, there's a big fee to get out of this, a 9-figure fee if we wanted to somehow break away from this and go to a different conference. What would that process look like? What would the legal battles look like? Yada, yada, yada. We said as soon as that Sunday happened, the ACC just got looked at and told, your stuff is lesser than. And Florida State and all those teams that might have been a little bit motivated before, I'd imagine for Florida State especially then, was incredibly motivated, and we were right. Obviously, this was going to be the logical next step for a conversation that had gone on before and that had the ultimate fuel put on the fire of, you did everything right and it still wasn't good enough, and people could say it was because of the quarterback, but I still think the backdrop of the way your conference is perceived in the current landscape is what gave you pause before and certainly gives you pause now.
I 100% agree with you. The one thing I'll say is, with the new system in place, they'll be affected less, right? Because the system we first knew was going to be the top 4 conference champs are your top 4 seeds. And we had 5 conferences. And so somebody, say they were all undefeated, someone would get left out of getting a bye. We could still have that discussion. But I don't know how it's good. We still don't know, right? Because they haven't decided how this is going to be structured, because there's only 4 Power 5 now. It's just like, all the conference, like the Big Ten or the Pac-12 or whatever, that don't have those number of teams in it anymore. It's the Power 5. It's not the Power 5 anymore. It's the Power 4. But it's a Power 5 with 4 conferences. So it probably won't happen again to Florida. If Florida State were to go undefeated and win their conference next year, they're going to be one of the top 4 seeds and they're going to have a bye. So from that aspect of it, what happened this year won't happen to them next year. So I don't know if that helps at all for them on, we want to get out of here quickly, or it's going to take some time if we want to get out of here. But we do know next year is going to be basically a complete change to how the system worked.
So I think the next year, the system change certainly negate some of the top end results from going this way, right? Like, this will happen again. But it'll feel less egregious because it's not going to be an undefeated team. It's going to be someone with 2 or 3 losses. It's going to be someone ranked in the teens. It's going to be on the fringe, so nothing's going to be as heightened. And, Dad, nothing's going to be immediate here because there are very real barriers, both financial and legal, that are going to make it difficult for Florida State or any of these teams to actually leave the conference right here and right now based on how all that's structured. But you know as well as I do, when people are rich and powerful and they feel like they're told no, that's usually going to prompt a response. And so I'd imagine for everyone around Florida State right now, this is just something that sowed the seed for what we always figured was going to eventually happen, and now just feels like it's going to speed up the clock because somehow, some way, the history of sports and the history of the world is when rich, powerful people want something done, it is amazing how often they find a way to get it done. And so I won't be surprised if much sooner than we anticipate, Florida State and any other of the number of big brands in the ACC find a way to get out of this and find a way to push us further towards football Pangea, where it's exactly what Chip Kelly described in the one super conference that rules them all.
I agree, because as every team in the ACC can just put their hand up and said, you have just told us our conference is the bottom of the power conferences. You have plainly and clearly said that, even though we played 10 games against the SEC and we won 6 of them, our conference is nothing compared to the other power conferences. You have shown that to us, so we are going to have to make changes on our own, whatever they can do. And you're right, nothing is going to be quick here at all. And I hope it eventually ends up to where Chip Kelly talked about and others have talked about, where football separates. You have one big power, one big group of 5, and we get back to hopefully the conferences the way they were, so there's not as much travel for the other sports. We've been talking about this ad nauseum, but it is about football. And how quickly can we get to that model, which we all kind of see it going there. We all see the road, right? There's split roads right now, but the biggest road with the most lanes on it is dead ass heading toward that. So how quickly can we get there? Who's going to run that? There are so many tangents to that. How does it get going? How does it even start? Where does it go? And how quickly can we get to where we all believe we're going to eventually get?
And it's interesting because so much of that stuff that you talked about that's going to go into making that decision, that was the story of the offseason, right? We were so relieved when we got to the regular season and we got to stop talking about conference realignment and grants of rights and television contracts and all these things that aren't football and aren't college football and haven't been. But at so many junctures of this season, Dad, these Saturdays that always felt like a safe space, all of a sudden we're inundated with these things making their way to the field. We watched as the last time certain matchups were going to happen inside the Pac-12. I listened to guys like Yogi Roth wax poetic on the last primetime game on the Pac-12 network when Notre Dame was playing Stanford, because that was quite literally going away. There were endings like that. There were the way that it worked its way into the CFP discussion with Florida State that is no doubt affected by the perception of all of this. And so it does feel like so much of this is sped up because a lot of this is seeping into Saturdays, and it's not affecting the popularity of the product yet in ways that are tangible and might not, but is certainly being felt in a lot of these ways. Nowhere more at this moment than at Florida State, who's weighing some big time decisions.
Welcome back to GoJo and Golic. Down in ATL, Arthur Smith is in the proverbial hot seat. Falcons had one of their most disappointing losses of the season on Sunday, falling to the lowly Panthers. Now, speaking to Georgia Public Broadcasting on Tuesday, Falcons owner Arthur Blank said the team will let the season play out and go from there. So he said the organization was committed to Coach Smith, but then adds the Falcons will assess where we are and go from there after the season ends. So, guys, that's sort of the PR speak for, yeah, it's on.
Yeah, it sounded simultaneously, Dad, like the dreaded vote of confidence, where it's like Arthur Smith's our guy, but then immediately told us the real subtext of almost every vote of confidence we've ever seen come from ownership, which is we're probably not going to have you coaching here much longer if you keep doing things like embarrassing us against the Panthers.
Well, see, here's the thing of why people might say, well, if you're thinking about that now, why not just do it? They can still win the division. And that would look awfully bad, right? So that's why I let it play out. They can win the division. They're sitting at 6-8 right now. The two teams in front of them, Tampa Bay and New Orleans, are 7-7. They play New Orleans. The last game, they play the Colts this week. Then they play the Bears and then the Saints. They split with Tampa Bay this year. Like I said, they finish up with New Orleans, and they beat New Orleans already this year. So they can win this division. So, A, it would look pretty silly to fire him now and then you win the division. And B, I could see him saying, let's wait and see how the season plays out. They could be the NFC South champs going to the playoffs. So this is one I can actually buy into, the owner saying, let's see what happens here, because they could be crowned. They could be hanging a banner as the NFC South champions this year still.
And this still feels much like, you remember the Mike Mularkey Titans, where they, I think, won a playoff game the year they ended up firing Mike Mularkey there?
Yeah.
If I remember right, like
yes.
That could very much be the reality here. Because, Dad, you look at, again, and we talk about this all the time, Arthur Smith came over last year and got us so excited this offseason. Like, I remember sitting talking with Mina Kimes on her podcast about, the Falcons have this chance for positionless football on offense. And look at what Arthur Smith was able to do last year, where he had Marcus Mariota as his quarterback in the middle of this offense. And they take this risk and they look at Desmond Ridder at the end of last season into this season and wonder, could he be the guy, considering all these top 10 draft picks you have all around him on offense? And all you've done is a whole lot of nothing besides frustrate us with your use of Bijan Robinson and have a defense that actually came out of nowhere to end up being the number 2 right now in terms of EPA per play, the second best rush defense in the NFL. One of the top 10 defenses overall in a lot of metrics in the NFL because of changes you made there, so you get credit for that. But, Dad, you seem to have miscalculated a lot of what you could have done offensively, given some of the quarterbacks that were available last year, by deciding you wanted to stick with and give a shot to Desmond Ridder and now go down with that.
So this is why, Mike, there's going to be 4 quarterbacks taken in the first round. Because there are a few teams, Atlanta, one of them, who's going to be looking for a quarterback and is going to have a mid-level pick, right? They're right around 500. They'll be right in there. They're not going to have a top pick. They're not going to have the last pick. They'll be somewhere in there. So that's not going to be Caleb Williams. That's not going to be Drake May, who's going to go right at the top. So there's a couple other quarterbacks out there, whoever they deem with their best grade, no matter what the rankings are, forget that. It's what the teams, how they grade quarterbacks. And it's always graded on the curve with a quarterback, especially when you need a quarterback. So, boy, we think he's right there in the fridge of a first rounder, but man, we can make him, that great quarterback. That can be a thought process, but that's why we always get more quarterbacks than we think sometimes in the first round. And that's why I think there'll be 4 quarterbacks taken in the first round because of teams like Atlanta who have that mid-level pick.
Yeah, but I guess it doesn't fix a lot of your ills when you're talking about reaching for a guy in a way that's kind of why you're here. Like, the way you evaluated that position has already gotten you into trouble, and now it's got you wondering, all right, do we really want to have Arthur Smith and the current iteration of this brass being the ones making the decisions about that, given the way that they've handled it thus far? And so, I don't know, Dad, they were as disappointing a team as you could have conjured up in the South for the way that this came together. We talked about that relative to the Panthers. Panthers the other day. But my God, when you lose to the team that's been the abject disaster and the laughingstock of the NFL, the way that Carolina has been recently, it calls into question almost everything. And I can understand. I know in this day and age, we advocate for patience more often than not, but there has been so much about this season and the way that they have used the resources that we all look at and see as a positive on that offense especially, and just completely mismanaged it.
It's amazing what comes down to a quarterback, isn't it? Because if they took a quarterback and started a rookie quarterback and had a bad year, you just chalk it up to it's a rookie quarterback, like in Carolina, we're having a bad year. That C.J. Stroud situation in Houston is the exception, not the rule. If you're a bad team and you start a rookie quarterback, you're going to struggle, and you have that at least as a head coach to say, well, I'm going to get a little bit of leeway because we have a young quarterback. But you decide to give Desmond Ridder the shot, and it doesn't work out, so that now puts you behind the 8 ball and could, in this case, cost a head coach's job.
100%. So lots still up in the air and on the table for the Atlanta Falcons, but we've heard it uttered aloud now that frustration might start to actually get teeth going forward here. So going to be that. They could potentially join. And would be very interesting, Dad. We talked a lot the other day to Diana Rossini about the interest that certain jobs are going to draw all across the league here. You had John Spanos coming out for the Chargers GM and coaching job saying there's no limits on who they're going to go after, and the next head coach and general manager pairing in terms of experience, in terms of salary, even though the Chargers have largely always been looked at as somewhat of a cheap organization in certain regards. We've seen them spend a bunch of free agent money, maybe not on the right people recently, but this Falcons job is an interesting one in terms of where it fits relative to those other situations, because again, we talk about the value of having a quarterback, but there is something to be said to also getting to choose your next leg of the adventure, as opposed to having a quarterback handed to you who's less proven than, let's say, a Justin Herbert's in the way that Bryce Young is going to be for whoever takes that Panthers job.
And you're also in a division where there's no dominant team, right? It's not the AFC West, where Kansas City is one of the division for the last 50 years. It's not when New England kept winning AFC East. You don't have a dominant team. So you're kind of in it every single year. So at least you have that as well to say, all right, there's not one team that's going to jump far and away ahead of us at this point.
No, there's not. And for that reason, now you look at and starting to look up at the draft order. Atlanta currently, according to Tankathon, sits at 10th in the upcoming NFL draft right now at their current record. And like you said, that's not going to be good enough to get you in range for one of the good guys. So all of a sudden you're starting to talk about reaching and going up to a place where you wouldn't have otherwise gone. So the wheel's going to continue to turn in the offseason there. Dad, I did want to get to this for a brief moment here and just wish a congratulations, a total turn of the wheel in the other direction. But if we're talking about talent acquisition, it's going to kind of largely go untalked about. This is the second National Signing Day that's going on today in college football right now. Used to be the normal National Signing Day that we've got going on. A lot of the recruitments coming in. I still don't know if they're going in on fax machines right now. But congratulations to the players that are making putting the pen to paper that weren't part of that early window, that weren't part of the transfer portal window. We've sort of robbed this day of what it used to be around the sport. But for anyone that is wondering currently right now, you got the Georgia Bulldogs, surprise, surprise, sitting with the #1 overall class, followed by Ohio State, Alabama, Oregon, Florida State, the Florida Gators, the Texas Longhorns, Oklahoma, Miami, and Auburn rounding out the top 10. It is amazing for all the change in the sport, Dad, how much certain things have stayed the same.
And it's also amazing the change. Now, I take, you, me, your brother Jake kind of out of it because we had an affiliation with Notre Dame. I did through my brother Bob going there for his years, and you and Jake and certainly Sydney from a swimming aspect of being at Notre Dame, of just how you were all brainwashed and wanting to go to Notre Dame. So there was never really a thought when the offer came you were going to be there. But even for most players, certainly in my era and even in yours, when you signed that national letter of intent, you were like, this is where I'm going to school and this is where I'm going to play. It seems like the line today is, this is where I'm going to start going to school and start going to play. We'll see where it all ends up, but this is at least where I'm going to start. It's almost like it's not that 4 to 5 year commitment. It's like, well, give it a go here and see how it goes.
Yeah, I've said it for a while. The process became a business a long time ago, and now the players have to operate as such. And so you're right. It is a starting point for most of these players. but it's still an exciting starting point nonetheless. Congrats, guys. Good luck. Go get that bag. All right, time to finish this thing off with my throne the way we always do. Stuff full of cookies, drinking milk, getting you to this, that, and the third. 3 quick stories to send you off on into the rest of your day. As always, make sure you download, subscribe, rate, review, leave us a 5-star rating. Check us out here live Monday through Friday from 8 to 10 a.m. Eastern on the DraftKingsNetwork.com, the DraftKings YouTube channel, Samsung TV Plus, Roku, and more. And if you miss any of the show or our great guests like our buddy Charlotte Wilder from the Oddball Podcast, her and Amin El Hassan, make sure you get that wherever you get your podcast or available right here on YouTube right after we get done with the show. We will get to an innovator on the golf course doing the Lord's work after we get you this word from Wrangler. Because, folks, we are brought to you by Wrangler. Jeans, shirts, and jackets made for the ride of life. Be ready for those cooler days and longer nights in styles that'll keep you warm, comfy, moving and looking great no matter where you are. You can wear Wrangler jeans literally anywhere, at work, out at night, playing a pickup game with friends, or at home, just watching the game on TV. They're that comfortable. They're that durable. And don't forget, there's a Wrangler shirt for every occasion, casual tees, snaps, and button-ups. You can layer them both together, get the best of both worlds. And, of course, the iconic Wrangler jackets. When the weather starts to chill and you got to venture outside, Wrangler is going to keep you ready for anything. So add some Wrangler to your getup with jeans, shirts, and jackets that look great, fit great, and move great, so you're always ready for whatever life throws at you. Save 15% on your first Wrangler.com order when you use promo code GOJO15. That's GOJO15, Wrangler, for the ride of life. And guys, the ride of life took one man on TikTok to a place where he wanted to do this. Dress up like Mr. Larson from Happy Gilmore with a nail in his head and pull off the Happy Gilmore challenge, the 18-18-18 challenge. 18 holes of golf, 18 beers, and 18 hot dogs. And Jesse, I feel like our buddy Emerson Lazio would probably be a lot more at home with this discussion given his love of tubed meat, but it's still pretty impressive.
It's wildly impressive. 18 beers is a lot of beers. I feel like I could eat 18 hot dogs.
Yeah.
Like, not, like, handily. 18 beers is a lot. I think I would start feeling very sick. But 18 hot dogs, I mean, am I crazy? I think I could do that pretty easily.
Yeah, so I think we could do 18 hot dogs, but I think you got to do one every hole. That's the problem.
Yeah.
And starting out, I think, would be fine. Listen, Mike, you've called the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest.
Yeah.
I watch it every year. It's one of my biggest regrets in life that had the chance to do that and wasn't able to. We both have done that with other foods as well. I don't, and God knows I love a good beer or 5 on a golf course. I don't think I could do this. I do not think that I could. I think I could drink 18 beers throughout the day. I think I could eat 18 hot dogs throughout the day, but not in the time frame of a round of golf, like 4 and 4.5 hours. I don't think I could do it.
No, I have a healthy respect for what the hot dog eaters do as competitors, and I firmly believe that the difference in this might just be the walking. Because, Dad, we're both thinking, and I think wired to think about golf in terms of playing it in the amount of time it does in a cart. You really got to slow pay this. Like, you can't have anyone else on the course with you, because if you're going to try and do this, you got to be walking, and you got to be walking at a pace that is slow enough to allow you time to consume this, but also fast enough to help you burn a little bit and walk off a little bit of this buzz. Because I'm 100% with you. I think the hot dogs are a little bit more doable over the course of like 4.5 hours than trying to do 18 beers at a beer a hole is by the end of that.
So here's the thing to you, Mike and Jesse. If we tried this, after 9 holes, do you clear the gut out, if you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah,
I don't know if you'd be allowed to, though.
You're not allowed to, probably. That's like
so
cheating.
once you throw, but what if you weren't trying to? If you just puked on your own, does that mean the challenge is over? I know.
Yeah, I think you failed, probably.
I know in competitive eating, you get disqualified in a reversal of fortune situation. I don't know if that's true here, because that might be something I would try and do, is just let it all go after 9, and then maybe I could do the back 9.
I don't think this is super regulated, unlike our friends over at Major League Eating
Yes,
who have clear
exactly.
Major League Eating who have clear rules on the reversal. At the same time, I think there's got to be honor amongst thieves at some point in a lot of these food and drink-based challenges. And if you throw up in the middle, I think you're DQ'd. So congratulations to the man dressed as Mr. Larson on TikTok who felt like punishing his body for the entertainment of the masses. God, do we live in a messed up time here. Thankfully, Jesse, we have things like that to save us, reminding us about the good times in the midst of bowl season, that we are all old and slowly marching towards our impending death.
Yeah, so Tuesday night, Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl clash between UTSA and Marshall featured an intriguing matchup, okay, consisting of the sons of a pair of former NFL quarterbacks. So we had for UTSA, Owen McCown, son of Josh McCown, and for Marshall, Cole Pennington, son of Chad Pennington. And guys, don't you just feel, I don't know, I feel frailer after hearing that. Just like you said, like I'm just so old. We're at the point where we're the sons of NFL quarterbacks who I don't feel like, I mean, I feel like they were around not that long ago. Now their sons are playing in college bowl games.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of these quarterbacks tend to have kids young, and I'm going to use that as the excuse. Owen McCown starting because Frank Harris, the normal quarterback for UTSA, wasn't available, I believe, with the shoulder in this game. But yeah, Dad, I feel decrepit, so I can only imagine how you feel at looking at this and having seen this happen with plenty of your teammates, former kids, who are like my peers coming up.
It's in my face every week. I'm doing an NFL game every week, and there's always somebody, who I played against, who's playing now. I played against their father. So I see it every week. So I feel old every week. And I felt old from the radio days, at ESPN, of which I started that in 1998 and went to 2021. I once had a young man who was in his later 20s come up to me and say, Mr. Golic, that's the first sign that I was old when he calls me Mr. Golic. He said, he went through this litany. I listened to you when I was in grade school on my paper route before school. I listened to you when I got up driving to high school. I listened to you when I got up to go to class in college. And then I went into the armed services, and we listened to you there as well. I'm like, oh my God, am I 100 years old? I mean, and that's what I get as well. Even when I go to these games, some of these players, oh man, I listened to you. You're in the NFL now. Oh, I listened to you when I was growing up. It is the unbelievable marker of me feeling so frigging old.
Yeah, I saw J.J. Watt once call you Mr. Golic, and that's when I realized that you were indeed a fossil. But I will say the underrated best part of this game that made me feel young and alive was watching Jeff Traylor, the winning coach. They came back down 14 in this game to beat Marshall. Because this was the Scooters Coffee game, got doused with we talked about dumping the bucket full of the bowl games product. He got in a Gatorade cooler shaped like a coffee cup, gallons of iced coffee dumped on him at the end of the game. And a step further, Jeff Traylor wasn't deterred by that. The post-game press conference started at 12:30 a.m., and he drank an entire iced coffee at the podium while answering questions.
Wow.
Built different all-star.
Wow.
He didn't sleep
Much
that
better.
night.
Much better than getting hot coffee poured on you.
Amen.
Yeah.
That's what I was very worried about there. So let's get to the third now for another shot of life here as Nikola Jokic gets to live out his wildest dreams in front of the camera.
I cannot. This is like what good fortune we have here. So a new commercial dropped. It's for Hotels.com, okay? And it's Nikola Jokic and Peyton Watson and a mini pony. So we don't see Jokic in like commercials. So this is what it's going to take to get him to be in commercials. Is they're like, listen, like, did he get to keep the pony? Like, I need to know the details.
Was it his pony? Did he negotiate this so that his pony could get some acting work and get a SAG card? I'm not sure, but you're right. I do love the thought that the key to Jokic's heart is just proximity to some sort of horse tangent creature, Dad.
It's incredible.
I love this guy. I love everything about him. Everything about you can't give me enough of him, especially outside of basketball. We see him in basketball and how great he is. I want to know everything about this guy off the court, and he certainly doesn't want to give up a lot of stuff off the court because he's never around, always doing his thing. But you can't give me enough of Nikola Jokic off the basketball
He
court.
always has times for horses.
I want to see the collaboration between Nikola Jokic and Little Sebastian from Parks and Recreation. I need Nikola Jokic, I don't know if he plays guitar, but Nikola Jokic playing 5,000 Candles in the Wind, the tribute song for Little Sebastian that was played at the Pawnee Parks and Recreation Festival there. That is my dream, and I will speak it into existence. I would also like to speak into existence that you go download, subscribe, rate, review this show. Leave us a 5-star rating and a review. Help us fight the algorithm. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you tomorrow.